5 things to avoid when pitching your startup. Number 1, when pitching your startup to investors, our tendency is to want to explain our product. But when we explain, we tend to be very detail-oriented because you're the expert. It's your startup. You really care about all the details and how it gets put together. But for the investor, they may not get the exact picture. They're going to get confused between all the details, like you get this part from Japan and this part from China. Instead, you should tell the story of your product, the passion, the inspiration, what people feel like when they'll use it. That is how an investor can connect to what it is that you're building. The second common mistake when startups are pitching to investors is that they focus on the product. Now, what does that mean? Let's say your product is just this little stack of 6 Lego. Well, you're the expert in that product. But when an investor, an experienced investor, looks at what you're doing, they actually know that you're going to take that apart. Because there's a saying in the investor community, no product survives first contact with the customer. They know that the product's going to change in response to market demands and in response to pressures. So if you focus on the product and think that's what they're really investing in, that's a mistake. The third common mistake when pitching your startup to investors is to focus on what you don't know, to share your doubts, what I'm calling I mean, things aren't clear. You're not sure exactly what people you're going to hire. You're not sure exactly how you're going to market it. Perhaps you're missing some critical resources on your staff. Investors want to hear your certainty. They want to hear that you're sure. They want you to put together a positive picture. Because if you can't put together the positive picture, then who can? A fourth common mistake when pitching startups to investors is to just say you're the best. Everyone else is an orange and you're an apple. I mean, you're just ahead. Some people even make the mistake and don't talk about competition at all. Investors know that in any market there are competitors. And in fact, they wouldn't be interested if there weren't competitors. Much more important is how are you going to hit the target, whereas your competitors might miss? What advantages do you have that will enable you to reach that market? So it's not so much that you're the best or that there are other competitors, but what enables you to reach the market and fulfill the promise of the market. And the fifth mistake that startups make when presenting to investors is to say that they're the professionals, that they understand this game, that they're going to go out there and win because they really get it. Well, the fact is that investment is a different kind of game, and you're coming to investors because you don't understand that game. You're like the people watching the football game and thinking that they are indeed football players. The investment game is very different from the startup game. It's about capital, it's about markets, it's about capital efficiency, and it's about many details of how the capital is collected, who's going to be in the next round, and that is not a game that you're familiar with by definition. So that was a look at 5 mistakes that startups make when pitching to investors. And sometimes I think it's like this famous illusion, I hope you're familiar with it, where there is a vase in the middle, a wine glass, and on the sides are 2 faces. Now, do you see the faces or do you see the wine cup when you look at it? At one moment you see the wine cup. At one moment you see the 2 faces because they're both there. And in that spirit, I want to flip around those 5 mistakes I just told you about and look at them in that bigger picture. So I told you it's a mistake to explain in over detail. But on the other hand, you want to tell your story, but be ready to explain. So that story is what's going to get people excited. That story communicates why your customers will be excited. And it can communicate it to people who don't know of details of your particular product, your particular technology, your particular market. But then, if you're lucky to get the second meeting with investors, of course, you'll bring your technical team and they'll bring you their technical team to evaluate and make sure that you know what you're talking about. So you need both. When I told you it's a mistake to overly focus on your product, what really comes in the picture for the investors is your team. They want to know all about you and how you decided to make that product, because it's the team that's going to pivot later. It's the team that's going to react to market pressures. It's the team that's going to have to make the hard decisions. A famous example is Intel almost dumping its memory business to shift into CPUs. So there's going to be hard decisions when that product changes. And they want to understand how you think about the product more than seeing the product itself. I warned you about sharing your doubts, your They want to see that you know. They want to see that, at least for their sake, you can put together an extremely positive and definitive picture of what will happen when you succeed. In the sunny side scenario, you take over the full market share. Now, those numbers, for me personally, and for people that I know, are always you experience when you're putting them together, but I'm just making this up. You're not just making it up. You're doing a survey to the best of your ability, and you're putting together the most positive picture. That shows your ability to get a grasp of the situation even when you don't know, to take decisions even when things aren't fully clear. And that's why it's very important to have projections, market size, and a very positive scenario. And lastly, I warned you about just bragging that you're the best, because I was saying that what you really need to do is reach the market. So competition shows that there's a market. If you were the only person with your product, then the market wouldn't even know what to do with it. And that's called being too early. And that's what punished, for example, the Newton had handwriting way before we had touchscreens, but it was too early. So investors would like to hear about your competitors. They want to know that there's competition that shows that it's a rich space, and then they want to hear how what advantages you have. And finally, that of course shows what you are pro at, because in the end, this is a new game, the investment game, and it's not your job to understand their part. In fact, what you're doing is forming a partnership with people who are quite different from you. You are committed to your startup. You are committed to your technology, to your proposition, to your people, to your value proposition. The investor is committed to understanding the movement of capital, what role capital will play in your startup as opposed to the general market. What will happen in the next raise? What kind of advantages are you going to give? What kind of rights? That's their job. And together you are different. And then you work together to bring more value, to bring together your startup. And that's why I thought of that illusion of the wine cup and the two people, because in the end it'll be you and your investor raising that glass of wine and drinking a toast to your working together to bring your startup to market. I'm Dr. Lionel Wolberger. It's my privilege to be a partner of TLV Startup Hub. Join us. We meet about once a month. We're Israel's oldest and largest meetup devoted to startups. Startups are basically a good thing. They bring new ideas. They bring new companies to life. And I hope I've helped you with the 5 mistakes to avoid when pitching.